Lord, thank you so much for bringing us all onto this platform. Father, help that your Holy Spirit will lead and guide. Thank you that Pastor Lupondwana is willing to share with us. Thank you for everyone who is attending. Help that they will learn a lot. And we ask that your Holy Spirit will lead and guide all the couples that are present. Please, we ask that your Holy Spirit will be sent here this evening. This is my prayer in your name. Amen. So thank you everyone. Pastor, thank you so much for always being willing to share your wealth of knowledge, experience, everything. We're here to listen. And so over to you. Thanks, Pastor. And
Thanks a lot, Connie. And good evening to everybody who's joining us. And I hope that we're going to have a wonderful and blessed evening today. We're going to be here for the week together until Thursday. And today I thought we'd start with expectations. And talk about them, especially now before people get into their relationship, into their marriages. I thought it would be good if we are able to talk about expectations. Now, I've come to the conclusion, and many people have come to a similar conclusion, and some people have written it. Unmet expectations are the leading cause for marital unhappiness and divorce. If you look at almost all the countries that keep statistics of that have done research on the leading causes of divorce, you will find that those leading causes will include things like money, infidelity, unfulfilled expectations or unmet expectations. Sometimes they will list in-laws, health problems, but essentially when you look at all of these leading causes, you discover that people had an expectation and the expectation has not been met. And in all my work with couples over the years, and you talk to other people, you'll find that it kind of agrees with what those who have done the research have concluded. When people talk about leaving their marriages, to a very large degree, it's not what they signed up for. Whether it's because they're being abused, and sometimes people say, "I'm leaving because I'm abused. I can't stand the abuse," or maybe their lives are threatened, or they just have what they call irreconcilable differences. That you'll find that as you sit and talk to them, this is not what they signed up for. I remember a lady who said, when we were talking, and the matter of the vows in good times and bad times came up, and the person said, "Yes, I did sign up to in good times and bad times, but I did not expect the bad times to come from him. I expected the bad times to come from outside, and then the two of us handle them together." And there are some people who hold the view that, yes, when I said good times and bad times, this is not what I meant, or I did not mean that I wanted to be in these good times and bad times for this long. So unmet expectations have been the leading cause for divorce, even if they are financial or matters of fidelity or the quality of relationships or so on. But once your expectations are not met, they've caused a lot of divorce. Even when it comes to marital unfaithfulness, marital unhappiness, you'll find that the bulk of what causes us to be unhappy in marriage, that our expectations are not being met. And to a large degree, it is because we feel that our expectations are reasonable. They're quite reasonable. I mean, you're not asking for much. And anyone who's complaining about things that are not going right in their marriage will tell you that I'm not asking for much. I'm only asking for A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so I remember reading a statement which was attributed to 12 Steps programs. And the statement was, expectations are premeditated resentments. Neil's spouse wrote, unexpressed expectations are premeditated resentments. But the whole idea is that once you have expectations and these expectations are not met, then it's like you are planning to resent the person who is not going to meet the expectation. Now, that resentment that comes from unmet expectations is causes a lot of marital unhappiness. So that even when people have not divorced, they still have this resentment, this anger, this bitterness in their marriage because they have these expectations that have not been met. Sometimes the expectations have not been met by the spouse. Sometimes it's just life. You expected to be somewhere in life, and that's not where you are. And it does cause a lot of resentment. So I wanted to start with that so that we can see how important our expectations are, because they will kind of contribute to the quality of our relationships later on. There is a text in James chapter 4. And the context in James chapter 4, James is talking about our lives, and he's talking mainly about the war that's happening in ourselves, between us and our desires and our lusts, and how we end up falling into sin because of it. But the concept you find in the text, James chapter 4, is what I'd like us to run with today. It's the concept, even though his context was talking about our internal struggles as human beings. And of course, those can even spill over to our relationship with other people within the church. He was not talking specifically about marriage, but you are able to bring the same concept and the same principle into marriage. James 4, verse 1 and 2, he says, what causes fights? And this is the New International Version. The King James will talk about wars. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. So what you get here is that he's explaining that it's these things that we want that causes fights and quarrels. It's these things that we want that we do not get that causes us to take drastic actions. Whether you're going to end up being violent, in this case, he's talking about killing. Therefore, you kill. Whether that killing is going to be literal, physical, killing somebody or destroying somebody's spirit or mind or reputation or causing some form of horrible toxic environment within your home. He says you covet. You covet is when you desire something that you do not have, that's not yours. You desire something, but you can't get what you want, so you quarrel and you fight. So the concept that you get here, the concept that you get from the text, is a concept that there's a lot of fighting and quarreling, and a lot of drastic actions that are taken by people because they can't get what they want, and it's the concept that I feel is very interesting. Of course, he finishes up the whole text by saying, you do not have because you do not ask. And then he goes on to talk about the nature of the asking, which is not what we're dealing with today. But it's important that we understand that there's a correlation between, and I'd even go to the extent of saying maybe even a causality between what we want and are unable to get and how we feel, and the fights and the quarrels that could result from the marriage. So today we're going to talk about expectations, and I'm hoping that as we do so, because this week we're dealing with people who are considering marriage, people who are even maybe at the point where they're considering engagement if they're not already engaged. But that's what we're dealing with, and I'd like us to handle expectations to begin with. Now, when we talk about marriage itself, there are three things I want us to start off with. The first is that marriage was created by God in Eden before there was sin. In the book of Genesis chapter 1, from verse 26, God plans to create human beings. He creates them in verse 27, male and female, he creates them. In verse 28, he blesses them and says to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. That's what he says in verse 28. Now, you find that this man and woman that are created in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, and God speaks to them in verse 28, blesses them and tells them what to do. The process, the step-by-step is what you see in chapter 2, where God creates the man, puts him in the Garden of Eden, and then he tells him what to do. And after he puts him in the Garden of Eden, and he tells him what not to eat from the tree of good and evil. And then he says, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make him a companion suitable for him. And then after that, animals are brought to him for him to name. God has already said it's not good for him to be alone. He's supposed to have a companion. And then he gets put to sleep. And then when he wakes up, there's this woman, and he bursts into poetry. This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she came out of a man. So this is what we see. All of this is happening in Eden. So God is creating a marriage for these two, and he's got the plans he has for marriage are in Genesis chapter 1. They're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. Yes, they're going to have sexual intimacy. Amongst other things, they're going to have children. They're going to raise their children. They're going to fill the earth. They're going to have dominion over everything God has created. So God has given them a job. He's given them a relationship. He's given them a responsibility. That's in Eden before sin comes into the world. That's marriage. That's the blueprint. And whenever we talk about marriage, to a very large degree, we will run back to the Bible. We run back to the book of Genesis to say this is what God intended. The reality that we live in is that now we experience marriage outside of the Garden of Eden. In other words, we experience marriage outside of that perfect environment, outside of that sinless environment, outside of that environment where everybody's clued up and clear. This is what we are going to do. Outside of that environment where the devil has stepped in and tried to mess it. We are experiencing marriage outside of Eden. We are experiencing it in a world that has been ravaged by sin, and at a time when for centuries, for millennia, people have been ravaged by sin. People have been perfecting ways of sinning. They've been coming up with new ways of sinning. In fact, we're at a point where people are inventing ways of doing evil. You see that Paul talks about it in Romans chapter 1. People have become so creative that we are inventing sins. We are inventing new ways of being sinful. That's what's happening. And it is in that context where some of the evil that we have invented, we have normalized. We have said, it's okay, it's true. We should do it like this. This is how it should be done. This is where we are. So as much as there's the ideal that comes from Eden, from the Garden of Eden, that we want to aspire to, the reality is that we are here. So we have to try and live the ideal in a sinful world. We have to try and live God's dream and goal for marriage for us in a sinful world that was not really part of what God intended, even though God, the plan of salvation, factored in us falling into sin. But marriage was designed for Adam and Eve, for us to live in the Garden of Eden so that we could fulfill God's plan. So this is where we are. So when we come into marriage, our expectations have to, of course, we're going to seek the ideal that's in the Bible, Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. And even when we go, by the time we get to Ephesians chapter 5, of course, you have to read Ephesians in the context of not just Ephesians, but you must read in the context of Timothy 1 and 2, because all of those three basically talking about the same congregation, and Paul is talking to everybody there. But even before we get to Ephesians chapter 5 itself, even Peter, when he talks in 1 Peter chapter 3, even in the book of 1 Peter and Colossians, when Paul writes to the church in Colossia about husbands and wives, all of that is in the context. Even when Paul writes to 1 Corinthians, particularly chapter 7, even when we bring chapter 13, where love is the love chapter, into marriage, all of that is an attempt to make marriage work in a sinful world that has really been ravaged by sin, in a world where the things we want, the things that are portrayed in scripture, sometimes when you read them, it's like, wow, really? Honestly? I mean, it sounds so far-fetched. That's the reality. And so this created in Eden, we're experiencing it out of Eden. But as we try to merge these two, as we try to merge the ideal of marriage that everybody has. And funny enough, the ideal you have in marriage is not just an ideal that's planted only for people who are believers. Even people who are not believers have this beautiful ideal of what marriage can be. They have this permanent, loving, caring, beautiful relationship where they are able to raise their children, where they are able to build a family and build communities out of this relationship called marriage. You don't have to be a believer to have that ideal. It's part of these things that I think God has planted in our hearts. When Paul talks about how God's invisible attributes are visible through what he has created. I think this ideal of what marriage is part of what people can see all over the world and can still desire. When we combine the ideal and the actual experience, we end up with a situation where marriage can still be a blessing. It can still be a blessing today. However, there's a 50-50 chance it's actually going to work out. And we get that from statistics. The reality of it is that almost everybody, I'm always careful to say almost everybody gets married for keeps, to be happily married, to build great life together. I'm not talking about those people who marry to scam other people, marry them to divorce them and get split their assets and so on. I'm talking about people who marry because they genuinely want to be married. They want to do this thing for the rest of their lives, and they want to be happy. They want to have a healthy relationship and a great environment to raise children and a life partner to go through life with. Even though we all intend that, we've got this huge number. Almost half of the marriages that people enter into, they end up in divorce. That's a 50-50 chance. And nobody really, well, generally people don't marry in order to divorce. By the time divorce kicks in, things have gone terribly wrong. And so that's the context we are in. And so when we talk about marriage and people are considering marriage, I read a long time ago, someone was saying marriage is like a besieged city. There's fighting inside, there's bombing and all of that kind of stuff. So those who are inside the city want to leave, want to go to safety. But then you've got these troops, these people, those soldiers who are trying to get into the city to take it over. So that's basically what happens with marriage. Those who are in, you'll find that many people want to get out, and those who are outside want to get in. And each one is like, I want to experience it myself, because for me, it might be different. My experience might be different from yours, and that's true. So this is the reality that we have of marriage. We live in a situation where even in the church, you look around, you see marriages ending in divorce. Yes, they are ending in divorce. And I'll tell you, I've worked with a number of people who've gone through divorce. They've worked very hard to make sure that those marriages survive. They've tried their level best. Of course, in hindsight, they look back and they say, maybe I could have done this and this and that. That's not the point. At the point where they walk away, they generally feel that they've done their best to make it work. So we've seen that happen in the church. And we see some great marriages as well. People who seem to be doing it, seem to have it together. People who seem to be thriving in their marriages. So we see these two examples within marriage, within the church, and even outside of the church. We look around and we feel this thing seems doable. We have examples of this thing working out. But at the same time, man, so many are crashing and burning. What do we do? And in preparing people for marriage, we are trying to improve people's chances of making it work. Everybody wants it to work. Almost everybody wants it to work. And even those for whom it doesn't work, it's not because they did not intend for it to work. And it's not even because of lack of trying. It's just that sometimes things go terribly wrong. And among the things that go terribly wrong is expectations. Now, we all have dreams of what we want our marriage to be. And those dreams are informed by a number of things. And we're going to talk about those things. That's the dream that we have. But then the dream meets reality. When the dream meets reality, the product of that is going to be a marriage. So the dream that you have is not going to be a marriage. That's just your marriage. And what's out there in the world, that's not going to be a marriage. It's how you are able to navigate the balance between your dream, what you intended, what you wanted, and the reality of what you have. That's what you're going to have. People who live only in their dreams and never want to factor in their reality, they walk away thoroughly disappointed and they feel this is not it. It's not going to work. People who walk in it without any dreams and just will roll with the punches. Some people have said no expectations, no disappointments. Not quite true, because if you really are just going to face with reality and have no dreams, I've never quite met people who walk into marriage with no expectations out of marriage. So it's good that when we have our dreams, we be fully aware that there's a reality that will temper our dreams, that will kind of readjust our dreams. And we have to know that every successful marriage you see, the people had dreams of what they wanted in their marriage, and they faced a reality of what life was like, and they've had to find a balance between the two. And that's a beautiful marriage that you see. Everyone has had to do that. And because everyone has had to do that, it's important that when you think of getting married, you become aware that your dreams, yes, are going to have to be calibrated, is a phrase that Eli Finkel uses. So that you can have a very good chance of having a successful marriage that gets close to what you intended. And sometimes our marriages exceed our expectations, especially if you allow it to mature and blossom over time. Then it has the capacity of exceeding your expectations. Now, our dreams are made up of a number of things. First of all, video clips that are in your mind. I say video clips because we grow up with ideas of what we want, dreams of what we want in our marriages. But these dreams are not your full movie. They're not the full movie of day-to-day life. They are clips of what it's like to be together watching TV, what it's like to be together, maybe eating around the dining room table together, and you just have that short clip, that has people laughing, smiling, good food on the table, and that has a particular feeling with it. That's just a video clip, and that's it. That video clip does not include washing dishes, unless you're washing dishes together. There's a great atmosphere, but that's it. It's not about peeling veg, unless someone is helping you to peel the vegetables. So you find that it's video clips. It's video clips about you out on holiday. It's not about saving for the holiday. It's about you actually out on holiday doing a particular thing on the holiday. It's not about packing. It's not about ironing. It's about the fun parts of it. So we generally have short video clips of what we want in our marriages in that situation. People will say, I picture us in church sitting next to each other, singing from the same hymnal, listening to the sermon, the children sitting next to us. That's a short video clip. It doesn't include the fighting with the hair of the children and getting dressed and them being late. It doesn't include that. The video clip doesn't have that. The video clip has it's just a short clip of the beautiful things that you want. And so you find that when we talk about our dreams of marriage, we're talking about many short video clips that we've put together. Beautiful, great video clips are putting together. When I was in grade 5, standard 3, there was a picture in the back of our textbook of a car that was pulling a caravan, and it was driving down through a road, and this a tarred road with forests on both sides, green on both sides of the road. And I saw that picture, and I remember seeing this picture. It was the back of our history textbook, and it conjured in me this feelings and pictures of this video clip of going on holiday with my family. And it's something that I wanted. It was a short video clip. It gave me great feelings at the time. And some of these video clips last for a lifetime, because they inform some of the things that we want in life. Short video clips. So that's part of the dream. Secondly, the second thing that informs our dreams is what we saw around you. What we see around us informs the dreams as well. Those people who come from families where your parents had a great marriage, they were together, or they may still be together, where you had a great father, great mother, they seem to have a great marriage. And you see how they treated one another, how they handled one another. And you saw a beautiful relationship. You come from a home where you feel this is what I want. And usually when you have parents that have a great marriage, you then feel that this is normal. This is how people should be. This is how marriage should be. And so if your parents make the bed together, for you, it's normal. It's like, of course, I'm going to make the bed with my spouse. And here you are as a young girl growing up, you're watching your father help your mother make up the bed. And you're like, of course, my husband's going to help me make the bed. Because you think it's normal, you've seen it, and you see how effortless it is. You see how easy they seem to be doing things, how they talk to one another. And even when there's a little beef or a tiff, it's not a big thing, it's just a little flash, and they seem to just resolve it and hug and smile at each other. And it seems to, and the whole thing looks so easy. It looks so comfortable. And you just cannot understand why a man wouldn't want to do this. You grow up as a boy, you see your parents interact like that, and your mother makes it look so easy, how they relate to one another and how they do things. And if she comes and she cooks and she brings food, either brings food to him, there are environments where the food will be cooked and shared, and she brings it on a tray to the husband, or sends the daughter to bring it to the husband on a tray, and you're like, wow. And you cannot imagine how this could be difficult for somebody to do. They call each other by pet names. They call each other honey or sweetie or baby or lovey. And you're like, oh, it's just easy. They seem to understand one another. And you cannot understand how someone could struggle to be a wife like this. It's just, you've seen it. So sometimes it's not in your family. It's with an uncle. It's with an aunt. It's with a relative. It's with a friend of the family. Sometimes it's grandparents. It's even worse with grandparents because they've had a lifetime together. And so you see this and you're like, this is how it should be. And it's part of the dream because you've seen it. This is not just something you've conjured from your mind. It's not something you watched on television. You saw it. It's real life. It's here. In addition to the things we see things on television. We grew up watching the Cosby Show, and that was a wonderful relationship to see how they interacted with one another. Cliff and Claire, of course, they were fictional characters, but it was beautiful to see. I had an uncle, my mother's younger brother, who had this beautiful relationship with his wife, Wantandi, and you looked at it and you felt, wow, this is great. You'd like to see have something like this because it's normal. You can see it. It's right around you. And in addition to the video clips we have in our minds and the things and sometimes the successful relationships we see around us, whether it's real relationships or fictional relationships, but you see it. In addition to that, we read the Bible. We read Paul saying, wives, submit to you. Of course, verse 21 says submit to one another. But verse 22, Ephesians 5, you read Paul saying, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. And then husbands, love your wife as Christ loves the church. And you read and gave himself up for her. And then you read this beautiful passage from Peter, how wives are supposed to live with their husbands are supposed to live with their wives with consideration, as weaker vessels, so that our prayers may not be hindered. And you talk about, and you see this picture of us just living with one another with consideration, with love, and with submission. And you have a beautiful picture of submission, especially if you don't come from an environment that was abusive. Then the concept and the picture of submission is beautiful. And you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. There Paul is talking about love that is patient, love that is kind, love that is not rude, that does not seek its own, love that is patient, love that is long suffering. And you look at this and you have a sense that this is what marriage should be like. And that's part of the dream. And that we have ideas of what we want our spouses to be like. We're like, if I get married, my wife would be like this. Now, this is before there's a face. My husband will be like this. And those people who've had dreams of marriage, if you've ever dreamt of being married, actually had a dream, not a dream, you'll find that you may have had a conversation with your spouse in your dream. You've interacted with your spouse in your dream. But something very interesting is that there was no face. In the dream, there was no face. There was the person, but there's no face. You can't say, I know what they looked like. They were attractive to you and they were good looking to you, but there's no face. There's just the concept of a husband in the form of a body that's moving, of concept of a wife, but there's no face there. So we're looking for people we can attach to the face that was in the dream. The person in the dream was this kind of a husband, this kind of a wife. And now we're looking for a face to attach to the dream that we had. And you have an idea of what your spouse is going to be like. And when you talk to people and say, what will your husband be like? And they paint a picture. It's like they've scripted them in a movie to say, this is what my husband will be like. This is what my wife would be like. And also you have this idea of, if your spouse is going to be like this is how you are going to be. You'd be this kind of person. And so this picture is kind of a complete in the sense that it's these clips, it's informed by your dreams, informed by what you saw around you, it's informed by what you've read. And the more marriage books that you read, the more you get to a sense that this is how it should be, and this is how your spouse should be, this is how you would be. And then usually in our dreams, we also have circumstances, Usually we're not broke in our dreams. We're not. We've got a nice home in a nice neighborhood. We don't really have financial problems. We may not be filthy rich, but we're comfortable. That's what happens in our dreams. We're comfortable. We have cars. We don't have bills that we can't pay. We don't have health problems or health scares. If we do, it's when we're old and it's stuff that we can manage. comfortably with each other. So the circumstances in the dreams are kind of conducive to a great relationship. So that's usually what happens in the dream. And when we think and talk about marriage, and when we want to marry somebody, and when we want to be engaged to somebody, this is part of the package we bring. I don't want to call it baggage. It's part of the package that we have. And we want the spouse to fit into this dream of this marriage that we want. That's usually what happens. Then there's the issue of reality. The reality is the uncut version of the movie. It's not just as much as the video clips we had were the beautiful moments. The reality is the bulk of life is mundane. That's the reality of life. The bulk of the reality is that there's nothing romantic about waking up in the morning. You go and have worship. At that time, you can say maybe it's romantic because we're going to be holding hands and when we are praying, reading the Bible. But there comes a point where you wake up and it's cold and you want to, you're not even in the space to do this, but you're going to do it or you're going to do it because it's part of morning worship. There's nothing sweet and romantic and great about going to the bathroom. You go to the toilet in the morning and then you bathe. Of course, the video clips will have us taking showers together every day. The reality is that it doesn't happen every day. Sometimes you just go and you do it yourself. Sometimes you don't even feel like taking a shower with your spouse. That's it. You're going to take a bath. There's nothing romantic about washing the bath and cleaning the bathtub when you're done, brushing your teeth, doing your hair. This is the regular mundane stuff of life. You go down, you start your car. If you need to warm it, you warm it. If you're going to drive out, press remote, drop kids at school. At this point, you don't have any kids. So you find that the bulk of life is quite mundane. You go to work. There's nothing romantic about being at work. That's the bulk of your day. You come back. So you realize that the video clips were actually very short snippets of life in reality. The reality, the bulk of it is just dull and mundane. It's things that you have to do that are not that exciting, but are just necessary. You would thank the Lord they're not traumatizing or horrible. If you can just go through the day and there's nothing bad, there's nothing wow about it, it's okay. You went to work, you come back. It's even better if you like your job. Many people don't like their jobs. They're just there for the pay. And so that's it. Then you realize that, man, the uncut version is not that wow and exciting. You're going to have to include wow and exciting moments in it. But the regular life is not that romantic. It's not that exciting. It's mundane. It has to be done. Some people say it's even boring because it's the same thing that you're going to do day in, day out. And then the weekend comes. And after a while, you pick up certain rhythms and certain habits for the weekend. And that's it. So that's the uncut version of the reality of life. And in addition to this uncut version of the reality of life, you get to realize that even when you say my parents had a great marriage, and I saw it was beautiful. Man, the stuff you did not see. If your parents had you after they got married, there's a time when before your parents were pregnant with you, when your parents were pregnant with you, when you were still an infant and a toddler, probably up until 5 or 6. That's a long time. That time, you don't really know what happened in that marriage. They were trying to find each other. They were trying to acclimatize to each other. They were trying to figure each other out. The volume may have been high at that stage. They may have been very rough with one another. You don't know the kind of conversations that they had. And even when we were old enough, you can say maybe when you were 3 or 4, I'm not sure about 3, maybe 4 or 5, you could remember certain things. And you'll find that when there's a child around, as married couples, we take most of our fights in the bedroom, in private, away from the child. And sometimes even when we are here and the child is here, the child is still young, we can have a disagreement, a seriously hot one, with serious words, but we'll just manage the tone so that the child cannot pick up that something is wrong. And then we continue doing what we're doing here. But most of those conversations will go in private. They'll be in the car. when you are there, or when you are sleeping or playing something else, we play music and and then we are here in front giving it to each other, or doing it in the bedroom. So there's a lot of stuff you did not see. There's a lot of fights we did not see. You don't know who apologized first when they had a fight. You don't know what each one had to give up for this marriage to eventually be like this. You may find that they may have had a number of fights about the dishes, about helping one another. And of course, you're not helping me, I'm not going to help you too. There's a lot of tit for tat fighting. And eventually, as a way of coming to a truce, you decide, okay, fine, I'll help you with the dishes. And I'm probably going to help sometimes, not every time. But your video clip had them washing dishes together. But if you had to roll back the actual uncut version, you'd discover, man, my dad helped my mother with dishes maybe once in 3 or 6 months. It was not a regular, everyday thing, but you saw the clip in your mind about those few moments when he actually did help. So there's a lot of stuff you did not see. There's a particular way in which you find that your mother treated your father in a particular way. And this is the wife that you have. But you don't know what your father did to be able to get that kind of response. What did he do to her and for her to be gladly coming up with this tray that has a plate of food and everything and give it to her with a smile? What did he do that you did not see? Now, because of the stuff you did not see, all you saw was the beautiful response from your mother in how she treated your father, in how she handled your father. And that's what you saw. But what you did not see is what he did behind the scenes. What is it that your father did that made your mother respond in a particular way? You don't know. You don't know the conversation they had in private. You don't know the compliments they gave one another, the support, the favors they did one another, the things they forgave each other for that allowed them to be gentle with one another. You don't know some of the shortcomings that they had to overcome for the things they have to tolerate about the other person that made them less judgmental or less critical. And over the years, by the time you become this teenager who's seen this beautiful picture, these people have been married for a very long time. They've learned, they've understood each other for a very long time. They've gotten to a point where they make allowances for one another. There's a lot of what we did not see in our parents' marriage, a lot of what we did not see in our uncles and aunts' marriage, in the marriages of the family friends, in the marriages of the people around us. There's a lot of what we did not see. And a lot of what we did not see informed what we did see. So what we saw in these marriages that we admire was the tip of the iceberg. The iceberg is how they handled one another, the things they did for one another, the things the way they spoke to one another, and where they came from, and how they journeyed to where they are right now. That informs what you saw. And many times when we have expectations of our spouses, we have expectations of the tip of the iceberg, the portion of the iceberg that's visible above the water. But we because we don't know what was beneath the tip, we don't always put in the effort. We don't always put in what our parents put in. We don't always put in what the other people put into their marriages for them to end up with the tip that we saw. We expect the spouse and the relationship to just be the tip. So I want to say that even when we say, I've seen a beautiful marriage between my father and my mother, I've seen a beautiful marriage between my grandparents, my aunt and uncle. I've seen that beautiful marriage. Yes, you saw it. But I would want you to be very careful about those expectations, because there's a lot more you did not see than you actually saw. And the bulk of what you did not see is what informed what you saw. I've interacted with people, worked with people who don't understand, who say, my father at some point did not work. And their relationship with my mother was still great. He was still a man of the house. He was still the head of the household, if that's how they operated. He was still helpful. But when we came back from school, my father was there. The house was cleaned, and he had cooked, and he was just being very helpful in the house. So even though he did not bring in an income, he was very helpful in the house, and his contribution in the house had a lot of monetary value. But beyond that, they seemed to get along very well with my mother. That's what you saw. Two things. That may not have been the initial reaction. You don't know what went through his mind, the conversations he had with other men, the conversations he had with himself, for him to get to a point where he accepts that I'm now no longer an income earner, I'm no longer a breadwinner, I'm going to stay at home. What he went through to get to a point where he embraced that role, we don't know that. We don't know the steps. We don't know how long it took him. You don't know the kind of conversations they had. We don't know the kind of pressure that he got with the wife, from his wife, from your mother. That pressure he did not get from his wife that allowed him to be in that role. How he responded to people who saw him cook, who saw him clean, who saw him operate like a traditional housewife. How he responded to the comments that they made, and how he felt. We don't know how he got there. We don't know what happened between the parents that made him feel settled in that position. And because we don't know that, it's a bit unrealistic for you to say, if my husband would not work, I would expect him to do what my father did. We don't know what your father did for him, to what he went through for him to get to that point, and whether or not your husband is able to go through the same thing. What your father's upbringing, life circumstances, and personality and belief system and philosophy informed how he responded to unemployment. Now you kind of expected that your husband is going to have a similar response to unemployment, and that's because that's what you saw. But a whole lot of what you did not see that informed that response to unemployment. So I'm raising this so that we can understand that the reality is that what you saw is a very small fraction of that marriage. And therefore, you can't always try and impose it on your relationship. You'll pick things from it. But the reality is, a lot went into the beautiful picture that you saw. And what went into the beautiful picture, bulk of it you did not see. We read a lot about marriage. And people write books on marriage. And I've written a book on marriage, Recharge Your Marriage. And what we write, when we write the book, we can't write everything because it would be a very long book, and you usually write because there's a specific point you want to bring across. So as we bring this point across and say this is it, and even when we make an example and say this is what happened, that when you're dealing with for example, I write in my book about one of the process of accepting that the respect that we may expect from our wives, from the perspective of a husband, is not the respect you'll actually get. And I'll give reasons for it. Now, if you read the chapter, it's chapter Respect in Marriage. You read it, you can read it and be done in about 15 minutes, and you feel, oh, okay, maybe even 20, I don't know. You read the chapter and you feel, oh, so this is it. But it took years to get there. And the process of getting there, the fights, the anger, the hurt, the harsh words that were sent, the silent treatments are not in the book. I'm just giving you the product. Even if I tell you this is what happened, I'm going to summarize it. We fought about it. We had problems. It's not breaking down the things that happened. And a lot of what you're going to read is going to be the refined final product. And even when we try to explain what happened, we can't give you the details of what you are going to experience when you go through the same thing. So yes, you've read about marriage, but there's a lot more about marriage that has not been in the books that you've read. That's the reality of it. And so even as we read about marriage, we are getting something from there. And so I wouldn't want you to walk into marriage with an expectation that your spouse is going to be the kind of spouse you've read about, or that you are going to be the kind of spouse you've read about. It's different. There's a lot of stuff you did not read that's not in the book, that as writers we did not include in the book. And even those who say, I'm going to go be very detailed, I'm going to be very graphic, they're still going to have to sift, write certain things and not write other things. So there's a lot of stuff. The reality is that when you get married, you get shocked by a lot of stuff that was not written. And then you hear people saying, why did people never tell me about this? Why wasn't I told about this? Well, because each one was writing to try and bring about a particular point. And I don't think it's possible to write every detail of everything that was done, that happens in marriage. Now, So we have this dream that this is what my husband would be like when we got married. The reality is that you can't script your spouse. You can't script your husband. You can't script your wife. As much as you may want a wife that's going to be like your mother, you can't script that your wife is going to be like your mother. When you say like your mother, remember, you've never experienced your mother as a wife. You've experienced your mother as a mother. Only your father knows what your mother is like as a wife. Even though you say, I have a husband like my father, you've never experienced your husband as a father. You've experienced him you've never experienced your father as a husband. You've experienced him as a father. Only a mother knows him as a husband. So what you see as a father and what you see him, how you see him interact with his wife, you're not on the receiving end of how he's handling his wife. Unless it's something abusive and you feel, okay, maybe, and even then you're not experiencing it as a spouse, you're experiencing it as a child. But you say, I want a spouse like my mother, a spouse like my father, a spouse like my uncles, like my aunt, like brother so-and-so, like sister so-and-so, like auntie so-and-so. And even though you may say that, you can't quite script that this is how they're going to respond, that this is how they're going to live life. This is what they're going to want. This is how they're going to handle you. This is how they're going to respond to your shortcomings. This is how they're going to respond to life circumstances. You can't script your spouse. You can't. So as much as you may say, I would want my spouse to be like this, and you are looking for a spouse who's like that. And this is the thing, you say, I'm looking for a spouse like this. The reality is you can't script your spouse. You can't. I want a God-fearing man. Yes, or you're going to have a God-fearing man. But you can't script how this God-fearing man, or when this God-fearing man is going to be overcome by temptation, is going to be overcome by anger, it's going to be overcome by his human nature. You can't script what weaknesses he's going to have. You can't script points in life where he's going to feel defeated and depressed. You can't script how he's going to handle the death of a mother, the death of a father, the death of your child, if your child gets to die. You can't script the person. And because you can't script the person, you have to understand that as much as you have dreams of how you want your spouse to be like, you can't quite script them. You have to allow for your spouse to become what they are. Sometimes we say, this is the kind of wife I'm going to be. This is the kind of husband I'm going to be. And you say this with your best of intention. You deal with a couple before they get married. And then one of the topics we deal with is sexual intimacy. And so naturally, one of the questions that are there, I use a workbook for premarital counseling that I put together called Before You Say I Do. And one of the questions in the chapter of sexual intimacy is, how often do you think you should, as a couple, be sexually intimate, have sex? And you find that because people are very optimistic, they will talk about how no, as often as we both feel like having sex. Okay, what if one wants to have sex and the other one doesn't want to have sex? Well, we'll try to be understanding because this is the only place where the other person is going to have their sexual needs met. So we'll try to meet each other halfway and make sure that people are sexually satisfied within the marriage, because there's nowhere else they can go. That's a discussion before people get married. People are very open. They're very understanding. They really intend to please one another. And of course, the idea at that stage that is they're going to have this sexually fulfilling relationship. 9 months down the line, after they've been married for 9 months, now the conversation comes. And as they're dealing with the situation 9 months after they're married, they're coming to you now for counseling. And the problem is, he always wants to have sex. You're like, what do you mean always? All the time. Like, okay, fine. And you don't want to have sex. No, I can't be having sex every time, every day wants to have sex. And this one responds, yeah, but when we talked about this, you said we can have sex all the time. I mean, I remember one lady even said, well, sex should be like breastfeeding. You give it on demand. And then the husband is like, but we agreed that we always have sex, whenever one needs. I mean, even quoting 1 Corinthians chapter 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 talks about how if you should not deny one another except with mutual consent, so that you can, pray and then come back afterwards, so that you may be tempted by the devil. And then you find the wife then say, yes, I agreed to that, but this is not what I meant. I did not know this is what I was going to end up with. So you get to realize that you can say, I'm going to be the kind of wife who's going to be sexually satisfying to my husband. Every time he wants to have sex, we're going to have sex. No problem. And you feel, I'm going to be the kind of husband who's going to make sure that we have beautiful foreplay every time before we have sex with my wife. Hey, then you get married and you discover, oh, this is not what I meant. I'm going to be the kind of wife, I'm going to cook every day. When I come home, we're going to have nice 3-course meal. This is you dreaming now before you get married. I want to be able to cook for my family, have a 3-course meal every day when I come back from work, because that's the kind of marriage I want. Aha! Then you go to work, get married, you have a job, you go to work, you come back, you're tired. No, not only do you sometimes not able to do a 3-course meal. It's not even sustainable to do a 3-course meal every day. But sometimes you come back, you don't even feel like cooking. You don't. You feel, can we just take away or do a takeaway? Can we just have cereal today? And there are times when you feel, can we just have cereal? Just cereal. Let's just warm milk and do cornflakes. And I'm tired. Let's just do bread. Each one sort themselves out for today. So there are days when you're just not going to feel like cooking. And you initially, when you scripted yourself, you felt you'd be the kind of wife who would cook every day, 3-course meal, 7 colors, if not 8. And you discover, sometimes you're not even in the mood to even walk into the kitchen. You walk in there and the whole kitchen story is depressing you. So even the people try to script themselves and say, this is the kind of husband I'm going to be. This is the kind of wife I'm going to be. Man, reality hits and you discover the script you had for yourself. Hey, even that one is not working out. It's not working out. It's even worse if you promised your spouse, this is what you're going to be. This is what you're going to be. You were giving these big election promises, and then of course this is when we become very, very gentle and understanding with politicians, because we also made promises before we got married. I promised this and this and this and this. Then reality hits, and then you discover sometimes you're not able to deliver on the promises you made. So this is the reality of it. This is the reality. So even as you think of your marriage, and your marriage is in your mind, you are saying, this is the kind of spouse I'm going to be. Be open to the possibility that reality is going to be quite different. And as much as in our marriages, in our dreams, our circumstances were great. Circumstances were great. And sometimes we will then say, of course, I'm going to marry someone who's going to have a job. Yeah, marry someone who has a job, a nice, stable job. And the person is able to manage their finances, which is something we used to talk about. The person is able to manage their finances, they're financing their life, they've got their own place, their own car. Now we are doing the same. So financially, you're on point, you get married, and it's the dream. You have the dream. Then comes COVID, then comes unemployment, then comes war in Ukraine or Russia, whatever the case may be. Then comes some uprisings, the business doesn't work out, people get fired. Life happens. One of you loses a job, both of you lose a job. Then what happens? Then you realize that the circumstances are not what you dreamt. Now you have new fights you never thought you're going to have. Fights about money, you both unemployed, or one of you, or you both end up losing jobs and the other one ends up being underemployed. Underemployed is being when you are employed, but the income is so low you can't really quite make it. And you end up having to move up back into either your in-laws' home, or your parents' home, or you have to move into a setup you did not anticipate. And you know what happens? When you move into a setup you did not anticipate, then you have new fights. You have new fights that flow from your circumstances that you didn't dream about. And your marriage, the quality of your marriage now is being affected by your circumstances. You start out together and somebody has an accident. You're doing well, financially doing well. The person has an accident. Next thing, they're using crutches or using a wheelchair, or they're not completely what they were emotionally or mentally when you were, or somehow physically things are not going the way they were supposed to be. And then you're shocked. Yeah, man, what is going on? This is not what I intended. Things go wrong in the country. You have to move, relocate to another country. You get to another country, you discover, even though you are qualified to do certain things, the jobs that are available for you here in this new country are not the jobs that were available. Now, things have changed. And reality is such that our marriages are also informed by our circumstances. Not the circumstances we dreamt about, but the actual real circumstances we find ourselves in. And that's the reality. And how the dreams meet reality, that's what's going to produce your marriage. And because that's what's going to produce your marriage, we have to be very careful in the expectations we have in our minds. We have to start thinking to ourselves, yes, this is the marriage that we want. This is the circumstances. These are the circumstances that we dreamt about. And we now have to ask ourselves a very simple question. What do we do with the fact that we may not always get what we want? And in closing, this is what I want us to, this is what I'd like to say. Now, before you get married, please have realistic expectations. Now you may ask, what is a realistic expectation? Because I already think my expectations are realistic. Well, some of the things we spoke about today, you must expect that some of the dreams you had may not happen the way you have it. Also remember that as much as you have dreams, the other person also has dreams. And your dreams may not be completely the same. You come from different environments. You come from different environments. And those environments mean you've seen different things. You've seen different things. You've experienced different things. You're going to respond to life differently. So you try to temper you try to bring your dreams to reality as much as possible. And secondly, if you already have someone you intend to marry, discuss your expectations. Discuss your expectations. People are not going to sniff and smell your expectations. They're not going to find your expectations out via Bluetooth or something like this. Talk about them. Talk about the expectations you have. Do you expect your husband to be able to fix a car? If you do, tell him one day, I expect you to be able to repair a car. Our car stops in the middle of nowhere. I expect you to open the bonnet and figure out what's going on. Have those expectations. Have the expectations. Discuss them. Have those discussions about your expectations. Discuss them, because as you discuss expectations, you get to see what the other person's expectations are, and you get to tell them, I'm not that kind of person. Do you expect your wife to bake? Yeah, and she tells you, I'm not a baking. I'm not baking. Do you expect your wife to be a housewife and stay home and raise children, even if it's for the first few years of their life? Share that expectation. Why? So that she can tell you, I'm hiring someone. I'm taking my kids to daycare and I'm paying someone to take care of the kids. I'm not going to stay at home. And you know this is what you're working with. Because sometimes when you're going to have these expectations shared, after you've been married, this is when you're shocked and you come up with harsh words and you look around for Bible verses to back up your expectations. You're looking for spirit of prophecy quotations. You want in-laws to help back you up. Fundis, please come. Can you make a presentation about the value of wives staying at home and raising their children? Because this is their highest responsibility. There's nothing nobler than raising your own children. You now want us to help buttress your expectations because you did not discuss them. Please discuss your expectations. Then you are able to see how some of them are just not going to work out with this person. They're not going to work out with this person. And as you discuss expectations, this my way or the highway thing may not always work. You must be open to calibrating your expectations, changing them, adjusting them. Not just now, but even later after you get married, you must be open to calibrating those expectations. Because in life, you will not always get what you want, but I'll tell you what you can get. You can get a beautiful relationship that could be different from what you intended. But because you are willing to work together and build something beautiful, you can end up with a great relationship that's different from what you have dreamt, but it's beautiful, it's great, it's fulfilling. But because you are not too dogmatic about, I want it my way, you find that you're able to build something together. And by the time you have a successful marriage later on, you talk to people who've had great marriages, who've been married for a very long time. The marriages are different from what they want. In other words, the operations of it. But the fulfillment, the satisfaction is there, the happiness is there, and they feel they are happy with what they have. And sometimes you look back and you've realized, I can't start with I've worked too much, too hard to get to where I am. I'm fixing this. I'm gonna make the best come out of what I have now. And that's what the people are building. So when you think about expectations, remember, you're not the only person with expectations. The other person has expectations too. And then there's this big thing called reality. Such that when Peter talks about how as husbands, we should live with our wives with consideration, living with them as joint heirs and of the kingdom and as weaker vessels. The key word there is consideration. And it requires that we don't just impose expectations. it requires that we share, discuss, and find things that are working out for us. And some of those things that are going to work out for you may not work out for the people around you. They may not work out for your in-laws. But if it works for you, that's what you want to do. So please don't be a slave of expectations, because remember, unmet expectations are the leading cause for divorce. Now, Neil Strauss talks about how unexpressed expectations are premeditated resentments. You don't want to end up resenting your spouse because they have not met expectations you did not express, because they did not meet expectations that you had that they told you they were not going to meet. You're going to end up resenting your spouse for that. But if you don't want to end up resenting your spouse, be open to the possibility that your expectations, great that they may be, may not actually work in the long term. The key thing is marriage and how it's going to work out for the two of you. The nitty-gritties of it, those you negotiate as you go along. So I hope that as we think about expectations, we may start tempering our own expectations, start readjusting, calibrating them. Eli Finkel is a marriage researcher, and he uses this phrase about calibrating expectations, because sometimes they don't work out the way we do. I hope that the Lord will bless you as you contemplate building a marriage with somebody, and as you look for somebody. And please, in your conversation, don't just talk about fun things. Talk about expectations, great things and small things, but talk about your expectations. Share yours so that you can be not adequate, but you can be better prepared. You can be better prepared for your relationship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lupondwana. I'm sure you have benefited from this. Just remember, guys, Hollywood can mess us up thoroughly. Don't it's not like that, eh? And also when you listen to now I'm going to give away my age. When you listen to Luther Vandross, Teddy Pendergrass, Kenny Rogers, Peebo Bryson, guys,
you're really giving out your age. Julio Iglesias.
Yeah, they're making money out of these songs, and now we believe this. Tonight I celebrate my love for you, all that stuff. It's not like that.
Pendergrass, the Commodores.
Yes. I don't know what the people listen to nowadays, but don't believe it. I don't believe it. Also,
they usually sing about the dream side of marriage. That's what they're singing about. And it's inspirational. You listen to it as something you can aspire to. It's not always reflective of life. Yes. Yeah.
And very often I tell people, don't look for Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, because you are not perfect. We so look for perfection in other people when it's lacking in ourselves. And that also, like the expectations, we want to see things in other people that we don't have. So just please join every evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining. We will be joining same time, same place, right? And share, because we are live streaming on Facebook. We will be going on till Thursday. So if you want to get married, listen to this. If your marriage is not a success, it's because you weren't here every evening, okay?
I see a few people who are married already that I know in the group, but it's fine. It'll benefit them too.
It's a refresher. It's a refresher. We sometimes need these refreshers, so that we can just do what's right again, and it's just nice to listen to. I quite enjoyed that, Pastor. Thank you so much, everyone. And Pastor, if you can pray for us in closing, so that we can go tell others to come tomorrow night and listen to you again tomorrow evening. So if you can just close for us in prayer, please, Pastor.
Let's pray together. Our loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time we were able to spend together this evening. We thank you for the gift of marriage. Yes, it was given to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, but we are living it out today. And we thank you for the blessing that it can be. In spite of all of life's challenges, it truly can be a blessing. And we ask, Father, that what we shared here tonight may assist us in establishing good marriages, in deciding who to settle down with. And Father, I pray that it may also be a refresher for those who may already be married, that may remind them of certain things. And hopefully it will help us to calibrate our expectations, even though we are already married, so that we can build something beautiful, even though it may be different from what we expected when we started out. We thank you for the ministry of the Northern Conference Family Ministries Department. Continue to bless the leadership so that they can continue to provide programs like these for the benefit of our relationships and our marriages. This we pray in Jesus' name.